They always called me the failure, the one who couldn't measure up, the one who didn't have it together. I'm Emma Harper, the daughter nobody believed in, the girl they laughed at for running a tiny vintage shop, while the rest of them chased big titles and bigger egos. But while they were busy mocking me, I was quietly building something no one saw coming, an empire worth billions. You see, success doesn't always wear a power suit. Sometimes it wears thrift store jeans and a quiet smile. And what I'm about to share with you, it's going to flip the idea of success on its head. I never planned on anyone finding out. Not my family, not my friends, honestly not even the people closest to me. For years, I let the world think I was just a woman running a small, struggling vintage shop in Brooklyn, barely getting by, barely hanging on. They pitied me. They made jokes. At least she's doing something cute, they'd say, like I was playing dress-up instead of building a life. And I let them believe what they wanted, because behind that quiet little storefront I was building something so much bigger. Horizon Capital, a company that now sits among the financial giants of New York. My company, and while they were too busy whispering about my so-called failure, I was sealing deals, making power plays, and outgrowing every limit they'd ever put on me. But keeping a secret that big, it takes something out of you. At first, it felt like freedom, like I had control over the story. But over time, that silence started to feel like chains. It wasn't just about hiding success anymore. It was about hiding who I had become. I remember the day it hit me hardest. I was walking through my shop, pretending to care about what color thread matched a 1970s dress, while my phone buzzed with alerts about a $700 million 0-cents merger I just closed. And I thought, how much longer can I pretend I'm not who I am? There's a kind of loneliness in hiding your wins, when your family still treats you like the one who couldn't make it, even though you're the one holding more power than they could imagine. It eats at you. Every smile I gave at family dinners, every time I let them interrupt me mid-sentence to praise Claire for something far smaller, it chipped away at me. I didn't need them to clap for me, I just wanted them to see me, but they never did. Because I never gave them the chance. And honestly, part of me was scared that if I finally told them, they'd twist it, belittle it, or worse, act like they knew it all along. So I stayed quiet. I kept the truth tucked away like a diamond in my pocket, valuable, heavy, and hidden. But even diamonds start to weigh you down when you carry them alone for too long. My sister Claire never missed a chance to take a jab at me. Every time we were in the same room, it was the same smug tone, the same eye rolls about my little vintage shop. To her, it was a cute hobby, something beneath her glossy corporate world, and for years I let it slide. I smiled through the sarcasm. I stayed quiet through the judgment. But this Christmas, something in me shifted. I'd carried the weight of their disappointment for so long, it had become part of how I walked into a room. That night, though, I stepped inside their house, knowing it would be the last time I played small for their comfort. The moment I heard my mother's voice, I knew exactly where the conversation was going. She didn't even glance in my direction before announcing with her usual flair, "Emma, darling, we were just discussing Claire's latest promotion at Sterling & Pierce. She's now the Senior Vice President of Operations." The words hung in the air like ornaments on a tree, shiny, meant to impress, carefully placed for maximum effect. I nodded, smiled, and played my part. "That's wonderful, Claire," I said, even though I already knew the truth. The promotion meant nothing. The company she was so proud of, Sterling & Pierce, was mine now. But I didn't say that. Not yet. Claire didn't even look up from her phone. "Thanks," she said, like it was nothing, like the whole room didn't orbit around her every career move. I sat there, feeling that old ache crawl up my spine, the one that whispered, "You'll never be enough for them," the one that grew louder with every joke they cracked about my shop, every condescending glance they shared when I mentioned work. And still, I said nothing. My chest tightened, not from shame, but from the weight of the truth sitting just beneath the surface, waiting for its moment. I looked around that room, at people so sure of who I was, and I realized they didn't know me at all. The irony was almost too much to carry. Sitting there, across from Claire, my sister, who never saw me as more than the girl who ran a vintage shop on a quiet Brooklyn street, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. She had no idea that her less accomplished little sister was also the CEO of Horizon Capital, a company quietly pulling strings behind some of the biggest financial deals in New York. I had lived two lives for years. In one, I smiled politely at family dinners, deflected questions about my cute shop, and listened to advice I didn't ask for. In the other hand, I signed off on billion-dollar acquisitions and sat across from CEOs who knew me by name and by reputation. My heart was pounding that night, not from fear but from the pressure of carrying something so big, so true, for so long. I knew I couldn't keep it in anymore. Tonight would be the night everything changed. And yet, there I was, still nodding along while Claire soaked in praise and Mom poured another glass of wine. My dad's voice sliced through the room like it always did, measured, smug, and laced with his usual brand of superiority. Claire's division handled $3 billion in transactions last quarter, he said, swirling the scotch in his hand like the numbers made it taste better. Everyone nodded, impressed, eyes lighting up like they were watching the future unfold in front of them. Then he turned to me. Maybe it's time you thought about getting a real job, sweetheart. His tone wasn't cruel. That's what made it worse. It was casual, thoughtless. He didn't say it to hurt me, he truly believed it. And that hurt more than anything. I swallowed hard. The same morning he'd eaten breakfast, I had closed a deal worth more than Claire's entire company. But to him, I was still the daughter playing dress-up with thrift store clothes. I looked around the room and felt the heat rise behind my eyes. Not anger, Clarity. They had created this version of me. This tiny, harmless girl with soft ambition and small dreams. And I had let them. I'd worn that mask so long it started to feel real. But not tonight. Not anymore. The weight of my silence had become too much. The longer I sat there, the more I knew this double life had an expiration date, and it was about to hit. I wasn't just going to speak up, I was going to change everything. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, even when no one said anything. My mother's glances were laced with that familiar, soft disapproval, like she pitied the choices I had made. My father barely looked at me at all. His silence was louder than words, his cold indifference something I'd grown used to over the years, but it was Claire who cut the deepest. Her smiles always came with a sharp edge, her words always dressed in a kind of politeness that felt like a slap in disguise. She had made a career out of belittling me, wrapping her insults in sarcasm and silk blouses, never once thinking that I might actually be more than what she saw. And honestly, why would she? I let them all believe I was just the girl with the vintage shop, the side character, the failure, who had somehow made peace with being small. But that night, something shifted. I sat there and thought about all the holidays, all the birthdays, all the little digs I had swallowed like bitter pills, the way they dismissed my ambition, the way they made me feel invisible, like I could disappear and no one would notice as long as Claire was shining in the spotlight. And she always did. She looked like everything they wanted, a picture-perfect daughter with a tailored life and a resume to match. I saw it in their faces every time she spoke. The pride, the admiration, the belief that this was what success looked like. Claire had their validation, and I had a storefront no one in that room had ever even visited. "How's your little shop in Brooklyn doing, Emma?" she asked without even glancing up from her phone. The words were so casual, so sharp. They sliced right through the air between us. I had heard that line before, but tonight it hit differently. I felt the heat rise in my chest, the burn behind my eyes. Not from shame, no, that feeling had burned out a long time ago. What I felt now was pressure, years of silence pushing to the surface. They had no idea that the little shop was a front, a mask I had worn while building something far bigger than any of them could imagine. And in that moment I realized something. They weren't just underestimating me, they had never really seen me at all, but they would. Very, very soon. I had built Horizon Capital from the ground up, quietly, methodically, without anyone in my family ever knowing. It wasn't just a company, it was a machine that moved billions, steered the course of investments, and silently influenced Wall Street behind the scenes. And somehow, after all that, I was still sitting there in my family's living room, nodding politely, pretending to be the same disappointment they'd always known. I forced a smile even as my stomach twisted. "We're doing fine, Claire," I said, my voice flat. "The shop's doing just fine." But the words felt like poison in my mouth, because the truth was screaming inside me, clawing its way out. They still thought I was nothing, that I had wasted my potential, that all I'd managed was some tiny storefront in Brooklyn, but I had built an empire. I had outgrown them in every way, and yet they still looked right through me like I didn't matter. I wanted to shout, to break the silence I'd protected for years, to make them see who I really was. Not for revenge, just to finally be seen, just once. And then it happened. The doorbell rang. Sharp. Sudden. The tension in the room snapped like a string pulled too tight. My mother's eyes lit up instantly, her hand fluttering toward her wineglass as she stood. "James is here," she said, her voice practically giddy. "Claire, go, greet him." And just like that, the entire room shifted. They didn't know that James, the CEO of Sterling & Pierce, the man they worshipped for promoting Claire, wasn't there to see her. He wasn't there because of her accomplishments. He was there because of me. Because of the deal I had closed. Because Horizon Capital, my company, had just finalized a complete acquisition of Sterling and Pierce. And tonight, the secret I had held onto for so long was about to blow everything apart. They were about to realize that the person they had overlooked, dismissed, even pitied, had become the most powerful person in the room. They had no idea, not my mother, not my father, not even Claire. They all believed James, the CEO of Sterling and Pierce, was just stopping by for a friendly Christmas visit, maybe to congratulate Claire on her latest promotion. But James wasn't here because of Claire. He was here because of me. Because I had made this moment happen. I had planned it down to the second. The room didn't know it yet, but everything they thought they knew was about to fall apart, and I was the one who lit the fuse. I felt my heart beat in my ears as I slowly stood up. My legs were steady, but my chest was tight. I looked around at their faces, so sure of their place in the world, so blind to what was coming. They still saw me as the girl who ran a tiny vintage store. They thought they were the ones doing me a favor by letting me sit at the table. But tonight, that illusion was about to break. The doorbell rang again, not just a sound, but a signal, the moment I had been waiting for, and somehow the whole room fell silent, like even they could sense the shift in the air. My mom, clueless but excited, smiled wide and turned to Claire. "That must be James, sweetheart," she beamed. Claire's posture straightened instantly. She smoothed down her blazer, checked her reflection in the window, and practically floated to the door. She thought he was here to praise her. She thought tonight was about her. But I knew better. I had spent the last 3 months carefully structuring the acquisition of Sterling and Pierce through Horizon Capital, my company. Claire had no clue that her entire career had just been rerouted through my hands. And James? He wasn't just stopping by. He was here to acknowledge that change, to greet his new boss. I took a deep breath as the front door opened, my heart slamming against my ribs. This wasn't just a family dinner anymore. This was the moment I stopped being their shadow and stepped fully into the light. The moment James walked through the door, everything changed. The room, once filled with idle family chatter and the clinking of silverware, felt eerily silent. It was like someone had pressed pause on the entire scene, and in that stillness, his eyes found mine, not Claire's, not anyone else's. Just mine. And that look, it said everything. He wasn't here to congratulate my sister. He was here because of me. Claire, completely unaware, jumped up with all the energy of someone expecting a standing ovation. She smoothed her perfect blazer and strutted over, putting on her best fake humility as she turned to our parents and beamed. "James, I'm so glad you could make it tonight." You'd think she was royalty the way she acted, but James didn't even blink in her direction. He didn't say congratulations or nice to see you or anything a man says to someone he's there for. Instead, he extended his hand to me. "Miss Harper," he said, voice calm, confident, and deeply respectful. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." His words hit the room like a tidal wave. Everyone turned to stare. Claire froze mid-smile, confused. My dad's scotch glass stopped mid-air. Even my mother, always the one pretending not to notice anything, suddenly looked up like she'd seen a ghost. Claire's voice cracked the silence, barely above a whisper. "Wait, how do you know my sister?" James turned to her slowly, like someone trying to understand a joke that doesn't land. "Your sister," he echoed, puzzled, then turned back to me. "I apologize, I didn't realize you two were related." He cleared his throat, then delivered the truth like a calm wrecking ball. "Miss Harper is the CEO of Horizon Capital. She's also the new owner of Sterling and Pierce." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. That was it. That was the moment. The mask I'd worn for years, gone. My mother's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the hardwood floor. The sound slipped from her hand and shattered against the hardwood floor. The sound slicing through the silence like lightning. Every face in the room changed. My father's mouth fell open. Claire took a step back. And for the first time ever, I stood in that room not as their failure, but as the woman who owned everything they thought made them special. My father, the man who always prided himself on staying calm under pressure, stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, brows drawn together, staring at me like I was a stranger. He didn't say a word, just stared. But it was Claire who caught my eye. Her usual confidence drained from her face, leaving her pale, stunned, and visibly shaking. The sister who always had the right words, the sharp tongue, the perfect posture, now looked like she'd been hit by a freight train. "Owner?" she whispered, like the word itself was broken glass in her throat. "That's impossible. Emma runs a vintage clothing store." Her disbelief would have been funny if it hadn't been so tragic. I took a deep breath, finally, after all these years, no more pretending. "Actually, Claire," I said, my voice steady but low, "I own a lot more than that, including Sterling and Pierce." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud about to burst. No one moved, no one breathed. The silence was deafening. I could feel it. The exact second their version of reality cracked. Tomorrow, the press release would make everything official. But right now, right here, this was the moment their world flipped upside down. My head buzzed. My heart thudded so hard I thought they might hear it. The floor didn't feel steady beneath me, but I stayed upright, staring back at the people who never really saw me. My mother reached for the edge of the table like she needed it to hold her up, her knuckles white against the wood. My father looked like he couldn't decide whether to sit down or scream. And Claire, my brilliant, polished, ruthless sister, she looked like someone had just ripped the ground out from under her. And honestly, they had. I had. With nothing more than the truth they never cared to ask for. My voice didn't shake, but every word felt like it carried the weight of every year I had been silent. "Yes, Claire," I said, letting a small, almost tired smile slip through. "I own Sterling and Pierce. The deal closed 3 months ago. Tomorrow it goes public." And just like that, the room fell into stunned, breathless silence. I could see it hit them, not just the surprise, but the slow, creeping realization that the world they thought they knew had completely changed. My mother's breath caught mid-sentence. Her hand clutched her chest like she needed something to hold on to. "But all these years," she whispered, her voice small and cracked, "why didn't you tell us?" As if hearing it would have made a difference, as if the truth would have somehow been accepted with open arms back then. I looked at her for a moment, not out of anger, just understanding. "Would you have believed me?" I asked, soft but clear, and I already knew the answer. She wouldn't have. None of them would. They were too busy writing my story for me. "You always told me I was wasting my potential, that I'd thrown my life away for that little shop, so I let you believe it. I let you all think I was just coasting because it gave me the space to build something real, something of my own. I didn't want your validation, I wanted my freedom. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to, the truth was loud enough." Claire's mouth opened like she was going to say something, but nothing came out. She blinked once, then again, like if she just stared long enough the reality would disappear, but it didn't. And for the first time in my life, the silence in that room didn't make me feel small. It made me feel powerful. Not because I had beaten them, but because I had finally stepped into who I really was, on my terms. How could she even begin to process it? Everything Claire believed about me, everything she used to prop herself up, every smug comment, every time she looked down on me, was gone in an instant. I could see it in her face. That carefully polished confidence cracked right down the middle. My father, who'd always been the composed one, finally spoke, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "But why keep it hidden? Why not just tell us?" I inhaled deeply, and for the first time all evening, I felt the tension in my chest start to lift. "Because success isn't about putting on a show," I said, my voice steady but full of meaning. "It's not about measuring up to someone else's definition. It's about building something real, on your own terms. And sometimes the best way to do that is to let people believe you're nothing. Let them underestimate you. Let them ignore you, while you quietly build something they'll never see coming." The words hung in the air. James, still standing respectfully in the corner, cleared his throat gently, sensing it was time. "I should probably mention," he added, shifting slightly, "the official announcement goes live tomorrow morning. The board signed off about an hour ago." Claire's eyes darted to him, then to me, panic and disbelief twisting her expression. You bought my company?" she whispered, her voice almost childlike. I looked at her with a mix of calm and something close to compassion. "No, Claire," I said, softly but clearly. "I bought the company. Yours was just part of it. 3 months ago. Tomorrow the world finds out." She blinked, her mouth slightly open, as if still trying to understand the language I was speaking. But there was no misunderstanding now. The roles had shifted, the game had changed. And for the first time, I wasn't the one left behind, I was the one holding the pen, writing the next chapter. The silence that settled over the room was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. Not the awkward kind, not even the angry kind, this was heavier, like the air had thickened, and no one dared to breathe. My words were still hanging there, echoing off the walls, forcing everyone to sit with the truth. This was it. The moment the masks came off, not mine, but theirs. Everything they thought they knew, everything they assumed about me, shattered in one sentence. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than any "I told you so." My mother's fingers, still gripping the edge of the table, trembled like she was holding on for balance, because nothing about the world she knew felt steady anymore. My father, always the man with the calm voice and sharper tongue, looked like he'd just been hit with a wave he hadn't seen coming. His composure, his prized armor was slipping, and I saw the confusion behind his eyes. Not anger, not even disappointment this time. Just confusion and a trace of something else. Maybe regret. Maybe fear. And Claire was the quietest of all. That was a first. Her mouth slightly open, her eyes fixed on me like she was staring at a ghost. Or maybe something worse. Someone she had underestimated so completely, she couldn't even piece together what she was seeing now. For years she walked taller than me, spoke louder, earned their praise by the spoonful while I got the scraps. And yet here we were. The room didn't feel like home anymore, it felt like a courtroom, and the verdict had just been read out loud. I was no longer the little sister playing dress-up in the shadows. I was the woman who had just rewritten the story of her life in front of the people who thought they already knew how it ended. They couldn't speak because they didn't know how. Their version of me didn't exist anymore, and for the first time they were seeing me, not the daughter they brushed aside, not the sister they mocked, but the woman who owned the very company they admired, who had built an empire while they were too busy rolling their eyes. The silence wasn't mine to break, it was theirs to sit in, and I let them. My father was the first to speak, but his voice didn't carry the same weight it used to. It was softer now, like the wind had been knocked out of him, and he was trying to catch his breath while holding on to whatever pride he had left. "Emma," he said, eyes searching mine. "I don't understand. Why keep this from us? Why let us believe you were struggling all these years?" I stood still, calm, but the truth I was about to give had been burning inside me for too long. I looked him in the eyes and replied, "Because, Dad, success isn't about putting on a show. It's not about trying to impress people who are only watching to see you fail. It's not about climbing some ladder that others built. Real success, the kind that matters, comes when you build something meaningful on your own terms. And sometimes, the only way to do that is to let people underestimate you. Let them believe you're a failure, because while they're laughing, you're quietly building something they never saw coming." I let those words hang in the air for a moment, and for the first time I could see him hearing me. Not just listening, but actually hearing me. Something shifted behind his eyes like the first crack in a wall that had stood between us for years. But my mother, she wasn't ready. Her fingers still clutched the table, knuckles pale. Her voice, barely a whisper, trembled as she asked, "But why didn't you just tell us, Emma? Why hide this from us all these years?" I turned to her, and my heart didn't ache anymore. It didn't feel heavy, it felt certain. "Because, Mom," I said gently, "you were always so sure I was wasting my life. Every single time you held Claire up as the example, every time you looked at me with disappointment, I stopped trying to prove anything. I realized I didn't need your validation to be successful. I stopped chasing your definition of success and started creating my own." Her mouth opened, but the words didn't come. There was nothing left to argue. The truth had been laid bare, and it didn't need to shout. It stood on its own. That's when Claire finally spoke. Her voice, so often sharp and confident, now barely made it across the room. "So, what now?" she asked, her words trembling like she already knew the answer but was too afraid to say it out loud. "What happens next?" There was fear in her voice. Not fear of me, but of what she now knew she could lose. Status, position, control. Her foundation had cracked, and she was scrambling for footing. And in that moment I realized something else. I didn't need to take anything from them. I had already taken back everything they once made me feel I lacked. My worth, my pride, my voice. I looked straight at Claire, the same sister who once made me feel like I didn't belong at the adult table, the one who rolled her eyes every time I mentioned my little shop, the one who got all the praise while I learned to stay silent and work harder in the background. And now, she was standing there, speechless, stripped of every illusion she had built about who I was and who she thought I'd always be. "What happens next, Claire?" I asked, my voice steady, not angry, not smug, just certain. "You start reporting to me." Her face twitched. I could see the effort it took for her to keep her composure. "You'll be Executive Vice President of Global Operations. You've worked hard, and I respect that. But from this point forward, every major decision, every direction, every call comes through me." I let that sink in for a second. Not to gloat, but because I needed her to really hear it. Not the words, but the truth behind them, that the dynamic had changed, permanently. I wasn't the failure anymore. I wasn't the invisible one, I was her boss. Her mouth opened slightly. She didn't even pretend to be okay with it. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time and not liking what she saw. Or maybe, not understanding how she never saw it before. "Think you can handle that?" I asked, gently, but with a sharp edge underneath. She blinked fast, her throat moving as she swallowed hard. I'll think about it," she finally said, and her voice sounded like it didn't belong to her. Like even the words were uncertain about coming out. The room was still. You could feel the shift, not just in her, but in the energy between us. For so long, Claire had been the one in control. Now that balance was gone. And I didn't take it by force. I earned it, the slow, patient way that leaves no room for doubt. And in that moment, I wasn't just seen, I was recognized. Not as the little sister with the silly dreams, but as the CEO, the decision maker, the woman who had quietly built a throne from the bricks everyone else threw at her. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone in that room. The power wasn't in my title, it was in finally being respected for my mind, my choices, and the empire I built while no one was paying attention. I stood there, not to gloat, not to prove a point, but to finally own my truth out loud. My family, with all their blind spots and judgments, was beginning to see it, really see me. This wasn't about revenge, it was never about making them feel small. It was about finally standing tall in the space I had quietly built for myself all these years. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't crave validation. What I needed, what I claimed was the right to define myself. And in that moment, with the silence hanging heavy and their eyes filled with something that looked a lot like respect, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not because they finally saw who I was, but because I no longer needed them to. I owned my story, I owned my success, and more importantly, I owned who I had become. So if there's one thing to take from Emma's story, it's this. Let people underestimate you, and then shock them. Don't waste energy trying to convince people of your worth. Build, grow, level up in silence. Because when the truth comes out, your results will speak so loud, no one can look away. And hey, if this story hit home, if you've ever felt like the underdog, the black sheep, or just someone building quietly behind the scenes, this channel is for you. We tell stories that remind you you're not alone, and that your rise, it's just getting started. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and share this with someone who's silently building their empire too. Thanks for watching. Your story is still being written. Let's make it one worth telling.